Welcome to Discovering. Tonight's stories are a little bit more on the informational side. I have some outdoor news updates from across the UP. First, I talk with the Michigan DNR about where they're at with the wolf abundance trail camera study.
Early results from the AI classification is a little over 50,000 photos of wolves.
And an update on the moose population study.
So 9 of those 10 calves that were born are still alive.
And the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services recently updated the Eat Safe Fish Guide for 2025.
I can open this guide and say, I can eat the fish. I just need to know which fish and which water bodies.
So sit back and relax. It's Monday night, and it's time for Upper Michigan's very own Discovering.
The secret streams that flow beneath the cliffs of colored stone. Forest thick and healthy with birch and pine and oak. Surrounded by the greatest lakes this world has ever known. The black bear's awesome presence as he roams the hills and fields. Call of the timber wolf, the loon's lonesome trill. The eagle soaring high above, the trout lies deep and still. These are what I treasure, the only way I measure feelings that I have for this fine land. There is so much to discover when you're a long-time lover of northern Michigan.
The Michigan Department of Health and Human Services recently released an updated 2025 Eat Safe Fish Guide. They added 12 new Upper Peninsula water bodies with consumption advisories to the guide.
Each year we try to look at new bodies of water that haven't been evaluated before. State of Michigan has over 11,000 water bodies. We can't test all of those, obviously, but each year we get more and more and more. So these new guides had 68 new water bodies that were tested for the first time. 12 of those water bodies were in the Upper Peninsula. So the reason we see 12 new water bodies in the Upper Peninsula portion of the guides is because this was the first time they were tested.
The Ontonagon River made its first appearance in the guide this year due to mercury, which is still the leading chemical for consumption advisories for most bodies of water.
There are 4 other new water bodies that are first time appearing in the guide. They do not have blanket do not eat advisories, but they do have at least one species of fish with a do not eat advisory. All 4 of those water bodies, mercury is the driving contaminant. For one of those water bodies, Chocolate River, it has PFOS for some of the species in that river as well.
What were the other 3?
Spur River, Ruth Lake, and George Lake. And if I remember correctly, I believe those were northern pike due to mercury.
An increase in the forever chemical PFOS and lower limit levels have led to a 3-fold increase in consumption advisories across the Lower Peninsula. The UP doesn't appear to have as much PFOS contamination.
So PFAS is a group of chemicals, per and polyfluoral alkyl substances. They're carbon-based molecules that have fluorine attached to all the carbon atoms. They are only made by humans. They're not naturally occurring. And because of this, they persist in the environment almost indefinitely for a very, very long time. And so I've been mentioning PFOS or PFOS. That is one type of PFAS. It's one of the ones that is considered to be more toxic, and it's one of the ones that accumulates in living organisms, and it's one that we find in just about every fish we test. One of the biggest changes in the 2025 guide is how we are looking at PFOS toxicity in our recommendations. And the previous guides used a toxicity value for PFOS that was adopted back in 2014. So it was about 10 years old. And over the last 10 years, we've been looking at just a general emerging knowledge that PFOS is more toxic than we originally thought.
Consumption advisories due to PFOS are issued for some fish species in Lake Michigan and Lake Huron, the St. Mary's River, plus about a dozen smaller rivers and lakes.
Little Trout Lake in Marquette County does have a blanket do not eat advisory for all species of fish within that lake. We've only tested one species of fish, and that is the yellow perch from that lake. But the yellow perch were high enough that we thought it was best idea to put a conservative recommendation to not eat fish out of that lake until we can get more data.
Dukes and Kinross Lakes in Chippewa County have do not eat advisories for bluegill and sunfish because of PFOS. Cable Lake in Iron County has a do not eat advisory for walleye of any size because of PFOS.
We want you to feel like you can eat the fish from Michigan waters, and these guides will help you choose a water body that has fish lower in contaminants, or choose a fish in a water body that might be a better type of fish to eat out of that water body.
You can find the Eat Safe Fish Guide online, plus more of this interview is available on the Discover the UP YouTube channel. Back in February, the Michigan DNR, along with the Keweenaw Bay Indian Community and Northern Michigan University, collared 20 moose to study potential factors limiting moose population growth. Data from those GPS collars started coming in immediately, and the research team is now 4 months into monitoring the population. I talked with Tyler Petrulia of the DNR to see what they've seen and learned so far.
Right now, we're really focused on calving and calf production, trying to better understand how many calves are being born into the population, and then following those calves to see how many are recruited into the adult population after their first year of life. And so this winter we collared those 10 adult female cows, and we had the opportunity to do blood draws when we did captures, and that lets us test for pregnancy. And of those 10 cows, we've confirmed that 8 of those were pregnant when we captured and handled them. And so far, 7 of those 8 cows have given birth to calves, which has been really exciting for us to be able to monitor and look at calf production. And so 4 of those cows gave birth to single calves, and 3 of those cows gave birth to twins. So we ended with out of those 7 cows that gave birth, we have 10 calves, which was really encouraging to see. Even though it's a pretty small sample size, nice to see at least 80% of those cows were pregnant, and so far 7 of those 8 have given birth. And one of the really cool things that we're able to do with calf monitoring is use drones to do some non-invasive surveying of calf production and then also calf survival. And so we're really excited about this technique because it allows us to not have to go in and actually disturb the cow and disturb the calf, because there is a risk of abandonment when you go in and disturb a moose and her calf soon after birth. And in this way, we can go in, fly with a drone using the GPS locations from the collared cow, and we can stay at about 350 feet above the ground and about 400 feet away on an angle. And we can use a thermal drone that uses infrared sensing to find out where is that cow in the landscape, and then does she have a calf with her or not. And then we can actually zoom in, because these drones have really good zoom lenses, and so about 200 times zoom that we can stay far away. Most of the time the cows don't even know we're in the area. And then actually right now we're focused on, we know 10 calves were born, how many of those calves made it through their first month of life. So we'll do monthly survival flights to see how many calves made it from month to month. And so far we've observed 1 calf mortality. So 9 of those 10 calves that were born are still alive. The 1 calf mortality was attributed to a black bear predation actually at the birth site.
The DNR plans to collar those calves that survive next winter. Of the 20 moose collared last winter, 5 were calves, and since then 2 have died.
And of the 2 mortalities that we encountered, the first happened in March. And so this was just over 3 weeks after capture. We went to investigate the mortality signal, and upon investigation, we conducted a full necropsy. There was no signs of scavenging, no signs of external trauma that we could see. So we did collect all the organs to test for disease. We collected the head to send down to the disease lab for analysis as well. And what our wildlife disease lab found is that moose did encounter some head trauma, and so it did actually have a 1-inch fracture that caused some internal bleeding and hemorrhaging in the nasal bone, and then also in the head as well. Usually this is something that we see that's consistent with a vehicle collision, trauma like this, or an accident. But what we also did have is we had GPS data, so we knew that that calf actually hadn't encountered any paved roadways during that time. And so we knew it wasn't a vehicle collision, but with moose, we do know that they're maybe not always the most graceful. It is a known cause of death that moose can have accidents. They can trip, they can fall, sometimes they can kick each other. If they're fleeing, if they're surprised, startled, you can result in some types of trauma if they encounter or run into something or fall down. We did have really good evidence that it was unlikely related to any of the capture we did, because the capture was over 3 weeks prior, and all the hemorrhaging was very recent. So the second mortality that we observed was actually a male yearling, or about a male 10 months old, and this happened in mid-April. And we got the mortality signal on that animal. We were able to investigate it the next day. And when we arrived, we saw heavy consumption of the carcass. But what we did see is puncture wounds on the neck, as well as hemorrhaging along the neck. And that let us know that this animal was alive when those puncture wounds were made. And so that's a good indication that this was likely a predation. And the spacing on it and the tracks at the scene led us to believe that this was a wolf predation. There was multiple individuals who weren't able to confirm how many wolves, but at least more than one were at the site. And then later we were able to go back and actually use our GPS collar data from our wolf monitoring that we conduct. And we actually had an adult female collared wolf in the same area, and we observed her enter the same GPS cluster as the moose at the same time, using those GPS collar data. So this really just helped confirm our suspicions of what we saw in the field and our field observations and our field necropsy to determine that the cause of death was a wolf predation. One of the other components that we're just starting to test out as well is using these drone flights to look at winter tick loads and look at hair loss. And so those data are collected early on, right after winter, when tick loads are kind of their highest and you have hair loss at its greatest. And this is also a time of year when you have those calves that made it through their first year of life are also at the greatest risk of mortality from winter ticks. And so we are able to use the drone flight to take some photos and look at how much hair loss and what winter tick loads look like.
Pictures taken of the moose show that some have lost up to 30% of their coats due to winter ticks. Winter ticks don't carry disease, but the blood loss, irritation, and coat loss can be fatal.
Moose really have a challenging time with grooming, so they end up rubbing. And so the first place you'll see is where they can't groom very well on their shoulders, and they'll actually rub to get those ticks off, because those ticks cause quite a bit of irritation, and that will result in a significant amount of hair loss. And obviously, losing hair at a time of year where you need it to thermoregulate and stay warm, that can be really energetically costly, and that can put a lot of stress on especially those young calves that they don't have the body mass yet, they don't have the fat reserves yet that say some of the adults might.
Another big thing the GPS collars will show is moose distribution and movement.
Most of our collared moose are resident, so they're spending their entire year in what we call our core moose range in Baraga, Iron, and Marquette County. But we do have some moose that are migratory. And earlier work, we knew that anywhere from 30 to 40% of our moose population may have been migratory from our previous collared sample in the late 90s. And really what we're seeing right now, again, it's early on in the study, still a small sample size. We only collared 20 individuals to start, but we've only had one cow and her two calves that have actually migrated out of our core range. But the interesting thing is they've actually migrated up into the Keweenaw. And so they've moved over 50 miles between their winter range and now where they're at in their summer range. And she's actually the last cow we're waiting on to give birth. She was confirmed to be pregnant at capture, and she did have two calves with her. So we know that she already had successfully reproduced the previous year. And right now we're just waiting for her to kick one of her yearlings and show us a sign that she's given birth.
Pregnant cows will kick off their yearling calves before they give birth.
And that's been a really nice tool with these GPS collars, is we can watch when those cow-calf pairs split. And then that gives us an indication that they're about to make a big birthing movement, and then they localize really, really tight, so they don't move for anywhere from 2 days to a week, where they give birth to their calf, and they stay usually in a lowland complex for giving birth.
These are the cow and twin calves that were all collared together.
They're both doing really well. They both migrated with her up to the Keweenaw. One of the yearlings split off right away as soon as they migrated to summer range, and she went another about 5-10 miles north, almost all the way to Lake Superior. And the other one has stayed with her, so wanted to be a little bit closer to mom. And that's certainly what's unique about it is, if you look at other moose populations, They do also have a portion of their population that may be migratory, moving between a summer and winter range. But even in Minnesota, they might have moose that are moving 8 to 10 miles between summer and winter. And so it's really surprising to see we had a collared moose that's moving 50 miles between her summer and winter range. And that's really just all helping us better understand what's the true distribution of moose in the Upper Peninsula. When we know we're seeing moose in the far west UP and we're having reports of moose out by Lake Gogebic, how many of those are moose that are migrating between summer and winter? And how many of those are moose that are spending their entire year, say, in one area and actually reproducing and starting maybe smaller populations in other areas outside of our core range?
The Michigan DNR launched a trail camera study back in 2023 to get a better estimate of the wolf population here in the UP. It's June 2025, and the public still hasn't seen any data yet from that survey.
So the Wolf Abundance Project was really started because of the challenges that we face in monitoring wolf abundance over time in the Upper Peninsula. One of the challenges that we face is because you have a saturated peninsula with wolf packs, you have a lot of overlap in those packs, and differentiating among and between those packs takes our staff a lot of time doing our winter track survey.
And the winter track survey only estimates the minimum number of wolves. This trail camera survey will give the DNR a minimum and maximum wolf population estimate.
It actually provides a measure of uncertainty of what the maximum could be, what the minimum could be. Where our minimum count survey is an index to abundance, so it is simply the minimum number. There's no uncertainty associated with it.
This study utilizes 1,200 trail cameras the DNR spread across the entire UP in 2023.
We swapped out all the SD cards in 2024, and we're able to upload all of those images, go through the first round of images using artificial intelligence. So right now we have just over 1.4 million photos of wildlife, and now we are going through the task of verifying that with human observers. One of the things we don't want to do is have this software misclassify, say, a wolf as a coyote or a coyote as a wolf. And so all of those images are getting reviewed right now. And that's kind of the time-intensive task to make sure that the AI is correct in its assignment, and just to make sure that we get the most accurate data possible. So early results from the AI classification is about 950,000 photos of white-tailed deer, about 80,000 photos of coyotes, a little over 50,000 photos of wolves, and then from there, fewer photos of other species.
Just as humans have a hard time distinguishing a wolf from a coyote on a trail camera, so does AI.
The AI has predicted just over 50,000 photos of wolves, but then we have, say, another 50,000 photos that are labeled as canid. So that's where the AI couldn't differentiate, is it a wolf, is it a coyote?
Staff from the Michigan DNR and Michigan State University are reviewing those photos right now. After all the photos are reviewed, they will be fed into a model to estimate the population based on the density of wolves in 159 different camera grid cells.
Each one of those grid cells that we have across the UP is about the same size as a wolf home range. And we have 8 cameras in each of those grid cells. And so we really want to make sure that we have a good understanding of our wolves present in that grid cell. And then we're going to try to be estimating density actually at that grid cell level across the Upper Peninsula. And so we have a few different models that we're testing to try to find what's going to be the most accurate.
The DNR had previously stated they would have their first estimate of UP wolf abundance in the spring of 2025.
So one component of the research project is how do you efficiently survey an area as large as the Upper Peninsula? And there's a lot of challenges associated with that. So even with our minimum track survey, we're able to only survey about 60% of the Upper Peninsula annually when we do that survey. With this research project, we are sampling the entire Upper Peninsula with 8 cameras per wolf home range. And that involves a lot more of time management, making sure that we have really good data management, making sure that we go through all of those photos. Are those photos of wolves? Are they photos of coyotes? We want to make sure that we have the best of data available to feed into our models so that we're not misrepresenting more or fewer wolves on the landscape than there actually are. And so part of the workflow is just figuring out how do we efficiently get through all that data so that when this transitions to a survey in the future, we can have those numbers much more quickly.
So when can the public expect to see those results?
Hopefully by winter, we'd be able to have our first estimate from the 2023-2024 year.
That's all for tonight, and I hope to see you right back here next week for Upper Michigan's very own Discovering.